What I've learned about B2B is you can bring a lot of B2C principles into it.
The scope right now in B2B, I believe, is so much higher than B2C. That is a very exciting place to build a career.
Today, a lot of people start with digital and AI, but they don't have the understanding of what it takes to build a brand or why you should build a brand at all.
A lot of people's lives will change when they realize that it's all about people.
Let's face it, some organizations are just not willing to take the risk. They might say, but IBM has been around for hundreds of years and you might go bust next year. It's always consumer in, not brand out.
What a great framework. You can literally make a template out of this and use it tomorrow. Welcome to Marketing Mavericks with Indiefolio. Today we've got Namrata Balwani with us and we talked to her about her journey. She has led her own company, has worked in advertising and even jumped to the brand side as well as jumped to a new geography entirely. We learn about how it is to actually shift to a new country and understand new customers. We also got a lot of advice for young marketeers in this. Thanks a lot for your time and welcome to the podcast, Namrata.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
I really appreciate you giving me a Saturday morning. The first question, Namrata, I ask everybody on the pod is how they started their marketing journey. And I like to kind of go back in time and understand what you were thinking of when you decided that, marketing is a career choice. If I'm not wrong, you did a BA in economics. So how is it that you decided that marketing is what you want to build a career in?
Actually, that's quite interesting because to be honest, one of the reasons I did a BA in economics and I thought that whatever career I choose is not going to involve mathematics. Okay. So I'm fine with mathematics, but not the thing I want to spend my life on. I was looking around at what are the opportunities available to me. I applied to lots of B schools and I happened to get accepted into MICA, which was a fairly new school at the time for marketing. Even today, it's one of India's premier marketing schools. And I wasn't planning it. I just took it up I said, okay, I got in. Let me go and see what this experience is like. It was like nothing I've ever experienced because we had to stay in Ahmedabad. But even in Ahmedabad, we were a bit away from civilization. And as I did that, I enjoyed it.
One big confusion people have today is what is marketing like today, right? Because traditionally you think celebrities, advertisements, that is how marketing functions. And even from a marketing technology standpoint, many people think, it's more for an analytical brain. So who is marketing for as per you today? Do I need to be more creative or do I need to be more analytical?
I'll just take a step back and start at the beginning of what is marketing. Like you mentioned about celebrities and advertising. Advertising is one part of marketing. Right? Marketing encompasses everything from understanding your consumer, understanding the pricing, building a brand positioning, value propositions, business impact of marketing, and then comes an actual output or creativity of a campaign. But today it's backed by a lot of tools and technology because you can't achieve scale today without that. A marketer today still needs to know all these underlying principles. I feel like some of them have got lost. So, today a lot of people start with digital and AI and tools, but they don't have the understanding of what it takes to build a brand or why you should build a brand at all. I would say for any young marketer starting out today, it's really, really important to understand the full gamut of marketing. And eventually you might specialize in something. But what I feel is particularly advantageous for people of my generation, because you've done all of this that encompasses marketing, you can be a generalist, but you can actually absolutely understand what you need to do in each aspect to be successful. Whereas if you were to only do digital or only tools or only AI, that's great and you can specialize in it, but you might not understand the key factor that marketing is essentially a human-to-human connect. And how do you build that even with technology?
Fantastic. I think at the core, as long as you're curious about understanding your customer, you should be good. I've had the pleasure to interview 50, 60, marketing leaders in this podcast last year. I see a lot of people having category expertise saying, hey, I'm in BFSI for the last 20 years. And there are a lot of folks, like you who come from a very varied background also. Like you've had your own agency, you worked in one where you also worked in multiple industries, be it now travel tech, luxury, automobiles, FMCG, etc. So, what's the thought process behind choosing a versatile focus area versus having a very specific industry you end up picking?
I'll try to answer it from my perspective. If you thrive in uncertainty and you have the curiosity to learn new things, then a varied background somehow becomes much more interesting. So, to me, the fact that I can bring cross category expertise and say, we're doing B2B marketing for travel tech today, but what have I learned in B2C, in luxury, in auto? What are some of the learnings that I can still bring into this area? To me, that's exciting. There are organizations that expect someone to have category expertise. And certainly, if you look at something like BFSI or pharma, they're very regulated industries. And so companies perhaps believe that having someone who's done it all their career knows a lot more about how to do that. But if you're looking at what enriches marketing, I think it's cross category experience, cross functional or different types of experience like agencies, corporate side, doing consulting. All these things challenge my brain in different ways. And that's what keeps me going.
Fantastic. And I wanted to know, do you have any favorite first principles or consumer insights in marketing which you feel remain true across industries?
I wouldn't say there's an insight that remains true, but what I would say is the underlying principle is delving deep into who's your consumer. What motivates them? What are their emotions? Even in B2B, you need to understand that we are all human beings. We all have emotions. We still bring those into our workplace. So when we are evaluating as a B2B, potential B2B customer, do I take this tool or not? There's still something at the back that's not purely rational. There is some sort of emotional principle attached to it. And that's what we really need to understand, which is what is the research saying? What are the pain points of these customers? How does this tool or this solution or this brand help alleviate that pain point? And then how do you tailor your messaging to resonate? But at the back of it all, what are the levers that help your company make money? And then you're going to use those levers as part of your messaging. And I think this sort of construct of understanding the consumer and understanding the business levers goes across categories.
You mentioned having varied types of experiences like an agency also is critical. Usually I hear marketing leaders advise young marketers that do a sales job in the start of a career or go to an agency.
Yes.
Do you agree with this? And if so, can you talk a little bit more about your perspective?
I think that's great grounding. What I would also say, since you talked about sales, is I don't know how many agencies do this today, but back at the day when I started in an agency, it was contract advertising, and contract was part of JWT, the group. And they had a program where for the first 3 months, we were not actually working at a desk. We had a training program that was away from that. All the senior people from the agency would come and train us. And then we had a division into groups, and we were all sent to different parts of India to understand the consumer and come back and present what we learned. And I think just like sales, this grounding of going into places where consumers are actually going to buy your product and just interacting with them, engaging with them in a market that you don't know much about probably is absolutely invaluable experience. I don't know whether a lot of companies do this today, but I think they really should. And the second part is that when you get into an agency, what really happens is you get to learn so many different things, and it becomes sort of invaluable even if you want to specialize later. So when you're in an agency, you automatically work on multiple brands. You do have a lot of pressure because agencies are high pressure environments. You learn to work with very tight deadlines and deliver things. And you also learn how to manage people, which is absolutely critical. You cannot get great work done without having the ability to know how to work with different people. So agencies give you that grounding. But then you might perhaps say, and that's what I said when I moved into the corporate sort of life is, look, in an agency, what we understand about brands is always from the outside. Brands don't always let you in on the revenue levers. How is it moving the business? A lot of them don't share that kind of data. When you move into an organization, you really learn to understand that one line of copy that you probably spent 4 weeks agonizing over is just one part of everything else that a marketer has to do. And you've got to learn how to work with sales, with product, with distribution, and bring it all together. And that creative output and that media plan is just one aspect of everything that you're doing.
That brings me to my next question, right, which is switching sides.
Yeah.
And people really feel, going to the brand side or going to the agency side can
Yeah.
be tricky. And it's exactly what you said, right? I've seen some JDs, job descriptions, where it says we're basically only wanting somebody to come from the agency side because you want to do vendor management for me at the brand,
Yes.
and then people think, oh, is that the only reason I should do an agency? So, I think when it comes to you, you
Yeah.
not only went to the brand side, but you also shifted countries. So,
Yes.
how was that experience like? And if you had to advise anybody to kind of successfully make that transition, how do you beef up your profile to kind of impress the next company that you're the right person for the job? Because exactly as you said, a lot of marketers and brand managers think that, oh, you think in a very one dimensional way. You forget
Yeah.
all the P's in marketing. You just talk about communication. So if
Yes.
you could just share your perspective there.
If you're looking to make a shift from an agency to a brand side, what's fundamentally important is that you understand, and pretty much goes back to what I said before, you understand the consumer, but you're also thinking about what are the goals that this company wants to achieve, not for yourself, but as an organization.
Mhm.
So when I was sort of moving, I was looking at this is a retail and hospitality organization. These are the things that they want to achieve. What is it in my experience that I can talk about that I might be able to say is something that they don't have?
Mhm.
And something that they don't have probably is the idea of understanding consumers really well and melding that with creativity. But also, what I bring to the table is the melding of creativity and technology. So it was sort of the intersection of all these points. So you have to think about it from a company perspective is yes, you have a lot of agency experience, but how are you going to take those learnings and have an impact in the role that you're at, which means you need to ask, what are your KPIs going to be? What are the challenges that this company has? These are all things that you can research. And these are all things that you can ask intelligent questions to now say, okay, here's how I can add value. And it's always about that. How do you add value to their business? Even if you come from, let's say, a one dimensional background of an agency, there's still going to be a lot of things you can leverage in that learning and prove that you can apply them.
Right, right. I have a friend who is switching countries, is shifting to another country, and as a marketer, they are really concerned about their knowledge of the customer, right? Because they've been in India all the time, and you feel scared, right? Saying, "Hey, I know what an Indian will buy, but I don't know anybody else."
Yes.
You made that shift, and I think you did a lot of digital transformation. You got teams together for a market, I believe, which was new to you, and you did it at scale, right? Like the Landmark Group had like multiple geographies and multiple brands across categories. So, let's say if I'm just hired to go to another location and build the marketing muscle for a brand, what did you do, and what's your what are the best practices a marketer can have to kind of learn a new industry category and a customer?
I think one aspect about moving countries is it did both excite me and scare me. It excited me because I could learn something new. Not that you can ever stop learning in India. That's not true because even today, I don't think anyone in marketing knows everything about marketing in India. It's so diverse. But having said that, I was excited about the prospect of learning about a whole new market. And here, it's not just Dubai or it's not just UAE. It was the MENA region, so it's all of Middle East and North Africa that you have to learn about. When I did that shift, I knew that I had to get into it quite fast. And the fastest way for me to understand was actually find people in our organization that are in operations and the front line because they are the ones who go to these markets day in and day out. If you talk to the person who runs the operations of a restaurant chain across MENA, you're going to get a lot of granular insights into how people decide on restaurants, what kind of food works, and things like that. And they may not directly give you marketing insights, but they definitely give you enough to know about the market. And the second point is I really leverage my network. Today, any of us, if we go to LinkedIn, we could find either a direct connect or a second or third connection who's in a particular market doing interesting work. And I would ask for intros and say, do you mind having a chat with me over coffee for half an hour to let me learn more. And the third part is trying to lay your hands on as much secondary research as you can, because those are the things that are going to help you understand from a broader perspective what are the shifts that are happening. And this is a good way to start. The other thing, if the organization lets you, is to actually do market visits. So they can fund your market visits. They send you to a particular market. You go and sit with teams working out of there and understand what works. That's another way to do it.
Often when I hear young marketers hear this advice, right? I see them talk to 100 people. What they fail to do is they fail to convert an observation into an insight, right? So what are the kind of questions one should ask a potential stakeholder, and how do you actually convert them into an insight? If you could share any example or anything which
Yeah.
could back this up, I think it'll make people understand what do you mean by actually understanding the customer and doing something about that.
Let me put it this way. I started originally by saying that as any part of marketing, need to understand the business levers. So the first thing is to literally understand, where does a company make its money from? Right? What is the source of that? If you are selling a fitness club, for example, broadly why people go to a gym, but how does that organization make money from it? Is it subscriptions? Is it add-on? Is it upsell? What are the things that get people to come into a gym? And how do we retain those customers? Those are sort of the business levers, right? How do we acquire them? How do we retain them? So I think that's really important to first of all understand. And then you've got to go deeper into thinking about, if people are doing this, or this is the way we are making money, what is drawing the customers? Is it, for example, obviously everybody says we want to get fit, but you might want to start looking at segmentation. Who are the various audiences? And what are their motivations? Somebody could be getting married and they want to lose weight. Somebody could be saying, hey, I'm going to be 40 and I want to achieve the best fitness of my life. So it could be lots of different motivations, which you're going to get probably insights from the guys who talk to the customer every day, the guys who do sales calls. And it's the same thing in B2B tech. The guys who do sales calls, or the guys or girls, loosely speaking, they know why somebody wants to buy something. So you're trying to get that insight as well. So you've got the business, you've got, let's say, the why, and now you're sort of putting it together into, how do I make this customer understand the value? Is the insight comes from what they want, why they do it. How do I explain it to them in a language that they're going to understand, rather than saying, I'm this brand and I bring this to the table. This is what I can do for you. It's always consumer in, not brand out. So to me, that's a sort of framework of developing these insights.
What a great framework. You can literally like make a template out of this and use it tomorrow. So thank you so much for making it so actionable. Another thing I see a lot of marketers struggle with is convincing traditional companies to do a digital transformation. I do believe it's easier now because it's like literally in the face, and if a legacy brand is thinking today, they're already late. It's a biased opinion I have. But when you were at the Landmark Group, right, I'm assuming that there could be some friction, right? Because what happens is that it takes a long time to transform a large conglomerate digital first. And then the challenge essentially is results, right? Because you need to have patience and these things take time to build up. So if I'm a marketer, I'm working in a traditional company, maybe I'm hired to do digital first strategies, how is it that I can convince my leaders to be patient and invest into a digital transformation strategy? Like, what commitments can I make? How can I tell them, here are the results I can prove to you, etc., etc.?
I like to actually start at the beginning, because I co-authored a book when I was part of this consulting firm I launched here called Tough Love Advisors, and we wrote a book called Made with Tough Love, where each of us wrote one chapter. And my chapter was about digital transformation. But what I really started with was a quote by a yogi, because it was about how hard it is for human beings to change. And as humans, it's hard for us, even in our own lives, to transform ourselves. So when you take a company with thousands of employees, it's going to be even harder. And that's part of it. I think the first step is accepting that this is going to be hard, right? The next step is saying, as a marketer, what do I do? Because when I came in from a marketing background, but I was tasked with digital transformation. And the most evident point to me was marketers speak a completely different language from sales, from product, from operations, or even from tech today with tech teams. We speak a completely different language. And so when we go in saying, If you go in saying, here's a great new tool, everyone's going to say, why? Why do I have to change the way I'm working? Because the salesperson says, I've been doing sales like this for 10 years. What's this tool going to do for my life? The ops person is saying, hey, I've been doing operations and looking at our basket values and so on and so forth and what we are selling for years. What do I need a new tool for? And people have a lot of fear. And those fears in digital transformation are, one, do I have the time to adopt a new tool? Because I have a long list of KPIs and I don't have time to learn something new. The second thing they might have is, if you get a new tool, and especially in organizations, all data is going to be transparent. Do I really want all data to be transparent? Or do I want to submit that report once a week, twice a week, that I help manage my stakeholders? And the third part probably is, why fix something when things are going okay? So these are all sort of the challenges that you run into. But the fact I think remains is that it's really about establishing a common vision and translating that into what are the objectives and metrics. So for example, if I say, what are the KPIs of an operations team? What are the KPIs of a sales team? And I presented to them as, hey, this is our business objective. This is what you want to achieve. These are the ways in which we might be able to do this faster, because this tool helps you achieve these aspects of your business objectives. Then you get a buy-in, because you're not trying to sell them a tool. You're trying to tell them, I can help you achieve your goals better. And that could be their company goals. That could be their personal goals, as I want to grow in this organization. And how is it going to help me do that? And these are the ways I think that the first step to starting with a digital transformation exercise is understanding the tool well enough to then say, how do I pitch this and present this in a way that it sounds like a win-win for both the CEO who wants to implement it and the team that has to adopt it. And it's that common ground, really.
Brilliant. How do you develop this skill? Because I see very often that people are not very good at understanding cross-functional importance, right? I keep on hearing, do one thing very well, the
Yeah.
world will follow you. And I don't see that happening today, because everything is, I think we had a time in the last 10, 15 years where everything became like specialisms. And now I think it's all coming together, with the
Yes.
advent of AI. It's like if you know everything in your brain, you
Yeah.
can type it out or prompt it out today. So how do you build that skill to be able to talk to a sales guy, a finance guy, a product guy, and a
Yeah.
tech guy while being a marketer at the core?
I'll answer that in two ways. One, from my personal experience, which may not be something everybody wants to do. And the second is tips if you want to do it your way. So what made me delve into this is entrepreneurship. I set up or co-founded a company, and I had to do everything from, is there toilet paper in the bathroom, to what's our cash flow, right? So when you're an entrepreneur, you literally manage every single thing and you put on all these hats. And to me, that was invaluable, because if I hadn't done that, I may have just said, yeah, finance just does something. I don't need to know what they do. But when it's the hard truth of, here's the money coming in this month, but here's the money that we have to spend. How are we going to find our way to be successful at this? You automatically start thinking more like a finance person. In a small way, you may not be the CFO of a Unilever, which has like so many data points to manage, but yet it gives you that experience. And that helped me sort of establish this connection when I went back into the corporate life. But the second part is, if you're not doing entrepreneurship and you're in an organization, you got to force yourself to take interest. It might sound boring at first, but if you are able to say, right, I'm going to set aside half an hour every month to have coffee with X, Y, and Z people, and continually do that and just have a chat. It's not an interview. It's not a right or wrong. It's just a chat. You'll start learning so much more about business than you would if you just stayed in your zone. It's great to stay in your zone and be the best marketer you can be. And it's great to develop expertise. But without that roundedness, because at the end of the day, we are all working in a business, either our own business or somebody else's business. Without understanding what everyone does, it's very hard. And as marketers, it is our job to understand different types of consumers. Well, even internal people in an organization are our customers, and we need to understand them better.
A lot of people's lives will change when they realize that it's all about people. If you want anything to be done, you have to be able to talk to people and learn from people. So I
Absolutely.
love that advice, right? That just a half an hour chat a month, which is nothing. right? You spend 10 times more on Instagram reels today.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you might as well spend half an hour a month with somebody who could really kind of make you more rounded. One switch again you've made, and I believe it's a switch, is a focus on B2B. I think traditionally coming from a lot of consumer focus in the start. One I want to talk about that, right, is if you go from B2C to B2B, how different is that? You just make these brochures and these white papers and these, reports, and it's so boring. I do B2B marketing for my own company, right? And whenever I tell them about how exciting it can be, and generally the scope right now in B2B, I believe is so much higher than B2C. That is a very exciting place to build a career. You'll actually help a lot of companies who right now are creating their B2B playbooks. It's not like FMCG where everything is done and dusted. So if I'm a person who's B2C focused, how can I get more knowledge about B2B, the buying committee, and all of those things which come in?
It's the same principle. It's really about, even when I got into B2B, and let me actually take a step back and say why or how did I get into it. When I was doing consulting, I was very taken by this world of MarTech, right? And I did want to understand more about how, and especially because I've done digital transformation before, is how can marketing technology enable marketers to do better? And so, what are some of the decisions that we need to make when we invest in MarTech? And in that journey, I met lots of MarTech companies just to understand what they do. And in many cases, I found that what they present and what marketers want are not necessarily the same thing. So there are a lot of companies who are great at B2B marketing, but there are a lot of companies who still come with, this is my tool and this is what I do, versus saying, this is how I make your job easier as a marketer. So I got so interested in that I said, hey, I've done a lot of B2C, but I'm very interested in knowing how I can do marketing that actually drives a purchase decision of a few $1 million. Like, how does that happen? Is it really that boring, or can we make it more interesting? So that's how I really got into it. And I said, if I want to learn something new now, I really want to understand this industry. And what I've learned about B2B is you can bring a lot of B2C principles into it. This factor that I said about human emotion, right? Human emotion does not necessarily go away in B2B. When you do research and when you talk to your customers, you can distill these into actual pain points that are translatable. And then I'm not going to go into boring marketing speak in B2B that says, here are 5 features, because nobody talks like that. When two decision makers in any organization are meeting over a cup of coffee, they're not going to say, hey, I found this great tool that can increase my productivity by 5%. Like, nobody talks like that.
Right.
They would say, my frustration is today, this data point is broken. I don't know how to address this problem. Maybe I need a tool to fix that problem for me, because the end result is I might be able to bring more revenue for my organization. So they're not thinking about the tool, they're thinking about their problem. And you have to go in with the same thing. If this is their problem, how does this tool help that problem? And then you're communicating it like that, but you're also saying a white paper is not boring. It sounds boring, but if you look at it, if you craft the content, you understand the motivations, and you create a white paper that brings value to your audience, you take as much pride in it as you would take in the latest 30-second ad campaign playing on TV, at least for me.
I want to give you a live example, or rather, I want to give you a scenario, right, which I constantly see B2B founders face. And I want to know how marketers can aid here.
Yeah.
In B2C, you can be competing against a multi-billion dollar, 100-year-old brand. And if your marketing, your branding, or your influencer strategies convinces the consumer to be like, oh, this is cool, let me just buy it, they will buy it. In B2B, and I've also faced this problem where I'm, as a creative company, I'm competing with a lot of legacy brands. And often in B2B, it comes down to credibility and trust, right? That, how they say you never get fired to hire an IBM, right? That all happens often in B2B, because even if they really like me, the decision, maybe one of the buying committee members likes me, likes my company, likes my team, likes my product, to communicate across the company and make a 1 year retainer commitment, it comes down to like, oh, but you're great, you're better, but it's risky to hire you, boss. I rather spend more money and have more inefficiency because I am more secure there. And in B2B, I have friends who are into manufacturing, steel, to running their own consulting companies like law and accounting, to even having their own SaaS softwares, right? They're all competing with these 100-year-old legacy giants or these software giants who commit to do everything and commit to do it better. So do you think marketing can play a role here and can help us maybe level the playing field while talking to a consumer? I was just keen to know about that.
The first thing I'll start with saying is you better have a good offering, right? So when you are competing with a legacy brand, you better have something you bring to the table that the legacy brand does not. Because if you sound exactly the same and do exactly the same, those challenges are going to be there. And I would also say from a technology standpoint is marketing cannot make the product better. The product has to be good, and then marketing can go out and create the interest and create the let me understand more about this product and create affinity in a sense. But we cannot sell a product that's fundamentally not in the right place. So as long as you have a product where you found a niche, you found the gap, you know what you do differently, you have to sort of broad base it as who are all my decision makers, because the decision makers will be in business, they will be in finance, they'll be in technology. And you need to think about it for each of them is what is it that's going to make them say, let me go ahead and try this out, right? So you might also want to examine how you do distribution. Is distribution everyone just has to come to you, or do you have partnerships? Do you have any partner programs? Do you also do it in a way that if somebody buys X product, they get to try your product? And those are different ways of thinking about distribution and sales that can help you, because marketing cannot do everything. But having said that, some of the things that marketing can do is really examine these levers and say, right, my biggest competitor is slow. They take a year to sign a contract and they take 2 years to implement something. But hey, when you come to us, we don't take a year to sign a contract. We can sign a contract in a week or 2 weeks as long as you are good with that. Or we can do it in a faster time frame because you might take 3 months, but then we don't take 3 months on our side. So it's about finding what is it? Is it nimbleness? Is it we do it better because this data that's always broken with legacy tech? They do 15 things correctly, but this one data piece is always broken. We fix that part of the problem. Then you've got to really go after it sharper and only talk about that rather than saying here are 15 features. And that's great. If you're talking to someone who's an open evaluation, 15 features are great. But if you're talking to someone who's heavily invested in legacy tech, you've got to really examine what you do differently and say what would interest the CTO, what would interest the CFO, what would interest the CMO. How do I present it to each of these in a language that they understand? You may not have success all the time because let's face it, some organizations are just not willing to take the risk. They might say, but IBM has been around for hundreds of years and you might go bust next year. So there's no getting around that.
Right.
But you might find that you need to sharpen your target audience and say, my target audience is not 100 companies. It's only 25 who are in the right space. And let me go after these 25 with a really tailored approach.
I just had one more follow-up, right? As a differentiator in B2B, the younger ones often think it's price because they're cheaper. It's just the way it is. Because you're new, young, agile, you're cheaper.
Yeah.
And their reasoning also is, as a business, increasing EBITDA fundamentally is what you need to do. And if I'm charging less, you'll save more money and that should be it. But I see a lot of people struggle when they put price as their differentiator. Do you think going with price is the right approach?
I'll say I would start with a differentiator that's a real differentiator that's rooted in the product or the business, and then arrive at whether I want to back it up with pricing. If you go only with pricing, there's a point at which you're going to go, I can't cut my price any further, but the customer has not understood my brand at all. What do I stand for? What do I bring to the table? So without having that clarity, just competing on price is a short-term strategy that's not going to take you very far. Even if you want to build a beta, you still want to build an organization over a long-term horizon. You need to balance the price approach with the real differentiator that you bring to the table and say, I'm going to use price as a short-term metric to exploit and say, I can get more immediate sales. But at the core of it, I'm not going to be shouting that out from the rooftop as the only thing that I bring to the table.
Great. I think so. Don't lead with pricing, but lead with a differentiator. And if it happens to be more cost effective, that's always a good thing. So super. Going to the last part of the chat today, you had your own agency for a long time.
Yeah.
You also work with a lot of agencies and you are a marketing leader now. So Indiefolio is my company. We in fact finished 10 years yesterday, and we've been running it for a long time. Thank you so much. We represent thousands of independent consultants and a lot of creative founders.
Right.
And I have a lot of questions, on their behalf to ask you, because right now they are really in a flux. What's happening with our industry, our job, our roles, our stack, blah blah. The broad question I have for you is, with the advent of AI, as somebody who's, let's say, just setting up their creative shop, or they're just starting their freelance business, it's a threat. Saying, oh wow, creative is either going to go in-house or creative will be part of the toolkit of a marketer. Do you think that's a reality, or do you feel that brands will continue to hire maybe AI accelerated creative agencies one day?
Yeah, that is a hard question because none of us can really predict the future. What I can say is that even in my own organization, we increasingly use a lot of AI and AI driven tools to look at content. And generative AI is just getting better and better at crafting some of these things. Having said that, what a true creative person brings to the table is that they translate that consumer insight into an articulation or a visualization that's so fantastic that you say, hey, wow, let me look up and take notice of this. Haven't yet seen AI reach that level. It could. If you remember an old Fevicol campaign, which Piyush Pandey came up with, the bus in Rajasthan, and nobody's falling off the bus.
Right.
How does one even think of that? Some of that comes with just the human mind. So I would say that today I would actually say I want to do freelance and use AI because I can suddenly do so many more pitches. I can suddenly do so much more work, but I'm still going to bring my own brain into it and learn how to harness it. So I think in the future, it's going to be a bit of what you said. It's about harnessing AI for the right things and being able to create something while still doing something that only your brain can do. But you need to have that knack. If you are just a person who churns out very average copy and you're just a content writer who says, I'm going to write 500 words today, yes, you're in trouble because AI can write those 500 words in seconds and use the same words even. And that's going to be a challenge. So what we all have to, and I'm quite old, so perhaps I don't have to really look at this 20 years down the line because I'll be retired. But 20 years down the line, you might have developed a whole new way of saying, what's my differentiator? How do I create an agentic AI that's going to help me just do this job better, faster? And you might find that people compete not just on their skills, but how better the agentic AI is versus the other person. I'm by no means an expert on AI, but what I can say is if you look at this whole age of agent, even if you look at what the HubSpot team has created with agent.ai, and you go on to agent.ai, there are individual agents that help you do so many individual things. And you might find as an agency that you can specialize in something. Let's say you've found the most kick-ass way to name a brand, because believe me, naming a brand in this age when so many new brands are coming out every single day is a key point. When a company introduces a new technology product, they immediately say, right, what should we name this thing? So it could be something as simple as that. But if you develop something and you can train it and you can add that layer of creativity and say, this is what my tool helps you do, it could be an add-on today that might become a main thing tomorrow. This is all blue sky thinking for me, but I think definitely it's the way that the world is changing, and it is for agencies to absolutely adopt this right at the outset.
What do you think separates a great agency from a good agency?
I think the fundamental thing is how good they understand human insight. That's what really makes a difference. And some of that is instinctual, some of that is through research, because agencies that don't approach it from medium and channel, but from human insight, can then manage to create something for different channels. So you don't start with, I make a great TV ad, right? It's what's going to move a person. And then is it a TV ad? Or is it a banner, or is it a landing page comes next?
I actually have a follow-up now that you say this. So I'm actually learning right now an online program from Micah. There's a 4-hour lecture I just rendered yesterday on making a brief. creative will
Right.
be. Okay. Now that is a time I feel when you have doing one campaign with like one radio, TV, and billboard, and kam khatam, right? Is how advertising was. Now, as you know, every day there are 1 trillion things to be done. And brand marketers, like I'm not complaining. I empathize with the marketer. They don't have time to sit and make like a 500-page brief, take your team through the brand guideline, and they're just like, I need it tomorrow, right? And you don't get a lot of time to study the business and the consumer to really derive an insight. Like it's becoming so hard. Now you're on the brand side, you've been on the agency side, you've had your own setup. What do you do as if you can give advice to any agency founder today? What do you do in such scenarios? How can I still signal, hey, I know your business, I know your insight, instead of a short time period?
I'll say it's getting harder and harder. So I absolutely empathize, because what happens is you get a brief, and typically the brief is not very well fleshed out, but it's like, yes, but I need your presentation in 2 days. But believe me, this hasn't changed from the time that I was in advertising. So we would get briefs and we would just have to deliver just like that. So to me, it's a bit about training your mind, and it goes back to curiosity. How much do you read, for example? I think we read less and less. We consume more of social media and things like that, which is great. And as marketers, we need to understand how people consume social media. Otherwise, how do we create output? To fall back on basics, you need to say, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes this week to read something new about consumer behavior, or I'm going to set aside 30 minutes to study a new framework, a framework that helps me put this in perspective. And believe me, there are loads of frameworks that are already available, where if you plug in the consumer and the brand and the attributes and so on, it can lead you to an output. And perhaps you don't have the 10 days to spend to do it. It might get you there in a much shorter period of time. And I'm pretty certain there must be some AI that helps you do that as well. But somewhere it goes back to the leadership of the agency. When I co-founded the agency, if I'm just on my team's case, deliver tomorrow, deliver tomorrow, deliver tomorrow, get it done, get it done, get it done, I know they have no time to think. That means either I have to do the thinking and guide them, or I have to find ways to take them out of that for a few hours or even half an hour. Let's have a chat on what's going on today. Present me something that's happening in your category, and let's try and understand how we can do something better. I think somewhere it's founder or leadership led to understand this and lead the way themselves.
Awesome. This has been some brilliant advice. Thank you so much. As a parting thought, Namrata, any specific advice you'd like to give to marketers who maybe want to be in your shoes one day, be a marketing leader? What are the things I need to do in the earlier stages of my career?
Don't get afraid of new environments. Learn as much as you can from loads of different people, job functions, and so on, and talk to people.
Superb. This is so helpful. This marks the end of the podcast. You were brilliant. I think there's so much I learned in just 40-50 minutes. Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time.
I did. It was brilliant. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much. And for everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to hear another marketing leader, please like, share, and subscribe. A new episode will come out very, very soon. Bye-bye.